Welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Ellison Maloney. As many of the world's leaders are meeting in Brussels, Ukraine remains a war zone. Let's go to Newsmax correspondent Jim Lechner for the very latest on day 29 of the war. He joins us live from Kyiv. Jim, good morning.
Well, good morning or afternoon from here in Kyiv, where the city center remains relatively quiet. We've actually have traffic on the street and the citizens here going about their daily business. The front line trace between the Ukrainian and Russian military units has definitely stabilized, as we've been reporting. However, we are continuing to hear increasing amounts of exchange of indirect fire, artillery, and mortars along those military positions. That's been going on almost continuously for the last 24 to 36 hours. Some of that fire spilled over into the northern districts of Kyiv and killed a journalist who was covering that story up there yesterday. The majority of the fighting, as we mentioned, continues out to the east in Kharkiv and then along the southern coast. President Zelensky says there's still 100,000 people trapped in the city of Mariupol. The role of the Russian Navy continues to be important in that operation along the seacoast. And the Ukrainians now reported they've destroyed a Russian Navy ship in the port city of Bernyansk, which is not far from Mariupol. All of this comes amid the NATO summit in Brussels and President Zelensky's repeated calls for international demonstrations to support Ukraine and pleas for military aid from NATO in the form of equipment such as aircraft and tanks.
All right, Jim Lechner, please stay safe. We appreciate it. Thank you. Rob?
All right, thanks, Allison. As we've been talking about all morning long, President Biden in Brussels this morning, scheduled to speak at an emergency NATO summit at 9:15 a.m. Eastern time today. So again, just about an hour from now. For more, let's welcome back in New York Congresswoman and member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Great to have you back on. This is a very important day, not just for the president, and his political career. He's been in office since 1972 with a quick break between being vice president and president, and now we've got him again. This is the biggest speech of his life today, and this speech could be remembered by history depending on how this war goes. What does the rest of the world need to hear from NATO, but most importantly, President Joe Biden today?
We need to have Joe Biden get out of the basement and take the lead. He is a wartime president now. We're witnessing a war in Europe. Unlike anything we've seen since World War II. And he needs to embrace the fact that he is actually acting during a war, and we need to project strength and we need to exhibit strength. I'm not hopeful that's what's going to happen because everything Joe Biden has ever done on foreign policy, to quote former Secretary of Defense Gates, has been a failure. And as someone who spent some time in the former Yugoslavia, even his presiding, the way he presided over the Dayton Accords after the war in Bosnia, he didn't do a great job there either. So I'm not hopeful, but for the sake of the United States, I'm hoping that Joe Biden shows some strength and shows that we are going to dictate the terms of what's happening in leading NATO and not have Vladimir Putin, who is committed to an act of war and potentially war crimes, as President Biden has indicated, in Ukraine. We've seen evidence of it. I hope he stands and leads and shows Putin that we are going to dictate the terms, and he's going to set down his arms and stop attacking innocent people in Ukraine.
I've got to admit, this war crimes conversation is just, I'm tired of it. Vladimir Putin's a war criminal. We don't need a tribunal to tell us that. Okay, he's slaughtering innocent people. He invaded a country with no provocation. He's a war criminal, but it doesn't really matter. He's never going to be hauled off to face trial for his crimes. He's 70 years old. He'll either die in Moscow, an old man, or sooner. But either way, he's a war criminal. I don't think we need the trial for that. Do you think the president is traveling over to Brussels? Do you think he's there going empty-handed? We keep hearing about these sanctions, that he's going to sanction, members of the Russian Congress, and there's going to be more sanctions to the Russian economy. But don't we need to sanction? Don't other European countries need to come on board and say, we're not going to buy Russian oil anymore and really hit them where it hurts?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we all know they've heard this because we've learned this because of the recent events with Russia, as you say, invading Ukraine, committing acts of war. We know that the economic engine of Russia is, is their use of energy and natural gas. That's what drives the Russian economy. So where do we hit them? We should be hitting them where in energy. But instead, some of these sanctions that President Biden has imposed don't even take effect until June 24th. By that time, how many thousands more Ukrainians will be killed? How many more refugees will end up in Poland and neighboring countries who are making incredible effort to take care of these people fleeing Ukraine and the murderous invasion that Putin is carrying out. And why aren't we doing something to actually sanction Russia where it hurts in the energy sector?
Right.
Why aren't we actually unleashing our own energy independence? Why do we continue to talk about the Green New Deal? We now have more and more articles coming out, even as far back as 2014, where we have seen that Vladimir Putin has used a misinformation campaign, a real one, in fact, against energy, against fossil fuels, and Europe has bought into it, taken themselves away from their own energy independence, and created this monster coming out of Russia.
And Donald Trump told us this was going to happen. Donald Trump warned NATO.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he warned NATO. He said, you've got to stop buying energy from Russia. You're going to pay for this ultimately, and here we are. It didn't take that long. I want to play you a soundbite. This is Joe Biden. This was an odd thing to say, but he keeps talking about this, and we heard this from the Canadian Prime Minister a couple months ago, this new world order. Take a listen.
Now's the time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it. We've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
Congresswoman, just about 20 seconds, but I was fine with the old world order. When the USA was number one, we were energy independent, and we didn't have any of the problems we have right now.
I don't know Joe Biden understands what the far left people who are concerned about authoritarianism and bringing communism to our country, something we're all fighting back in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. I don't think he knows what it is for sure. But if the people that are in his shadow government behind him know what's happening, you are going to see us continuing to head down this road of authoritarianism. And I caution Americans, think about what it was like to be in COVID lockdown with authoritarian governors around the country, and think about what freedom looks like. I think a lot more of us want to see what happened in Florida with some of the lowest COVID rates than see what's happening around the country and around the rest of the world, where we see people who want to dominate and control us with government.
Yeah.
Our experiment with self-governance is the way to go, and that's what we have here. It's up to us to save America, and we need to do it now. I don't even think Biden really knows what it is,
Good
but
point.
We need to save America now and save self-governance.
Congresswoman, great having you on. We appreciate it. New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.